Welcome back. I hope you managed to take a week break in between session 1 and session 2. In session 1, we looked at mindfulness and our thinking. In this session, we're going to have a look at mindfulness and our emotions and stress management. So we starts to get a bit more exciting this session. But before we begin, let's start with a pause. So we learnt this in session 1, and hopefully you've managed to start integrating the pause into your day-to-day life. So let's just pause now, let the true experience you're having come in. Accept the present moment non-judgmentally and with curiosity. And then observe yourself. What's going on in your mind? How's your body feeling? And just look up for a moment. Check out your environment. And then sigh. Your exhale will naturally be followed by a lovely, long, deep inhale. And as you're inhaling, just popping a smile on your face, and this releases the body's natural endorphins, which will make you feel better. And then E, you're ready to engage with clarity, balance, and purpose. So you've arrived in the present moment. And this pausing is so crucial to any mindfulness practice. And as I mentioned in session 1, you may want to schedule your pauses during the day, even setting an alarm on your phone perhaps, or just making sure at different transition times throughout the day you remember to take a pause. A lot of people talk about mindfulness and how it's all about being in the present moment. And so let's explore that a little further. Let's start with this definition from Jon Kabat-Zinn. The present moment, whenever it is recognized and honored, reveals a very special, indeed magical power. It's the only time that any of us ever has. The present is the only time we have to know anything. It is the only time that we have to perceive, to learn, to act, to change, to heal. It is important to be present so we don't miss the magic moments of our lives. But what I found learning mindfulness, it is equally important to be fully present so that we can respond wisely to life rather than react out of habit. We need to be fully present to act and to make decisions that align with our true values. Most of us live in a state of partial attention. We eat without tasting, we listen without hearing. Sometimes we speak without realizing the impact of our words. So I'd just like you to think for a moment, how do we get present? Maybe just jot down a few ideas of things that you do to get present in life. And now you may have heard of the expression when someone is behaving irrationally that they just need to come to their senses. And so I think a great way to remember how to become present is by engaging your 5 senses. So perhaps if you're walking and you want to do a walk and be present, so do a mindful work perhaps, engage your sense of seeing, looking around you, hearing what sounds, perhaps birds you can hear, tasting, I'm not too sure if that's relevant in the bush, feeling, so reaching out and perhaps touching. So I think in order to get present, having that in mind, that it does involve our senses, because sensing things we can only do in the present moment. We can't do that in the past or in the future. And so using our senses brings us quickly into the present moment. It may be even as simple as just letting your feet feel the ground beneath you. Now, this is an unusual sight to see in a mindfulness program, but we've learnt about how to become present, and now I want to explore the importance of remaining present during challenging times. We all understand the importance of being present so we don't miss all those wonderful magic moments of our lives. But why should I be present when the going gets tough? So let's just look at an analogy here. So in the visual in front of you, if I put my hand on a hot plate and I'm not present, I don't notice as my hand slowly heats up until it's too late and I'm burnt. I react by pulling my hand back and yelling. When I'm in a distracted state of partial attention, I become reactive instead of responsive. By being present allows us to notice exactly what's going on and recognize the impact it's having on us. We get a choice, and when we get a choice, most of us know what to do. But most of the time, we're not present, so we just don't notice early enough, and so we don't get to choose. We react instead of responding. So if I'm mindful and I have my hand on that element, as the element is heating up, I start to notice and I move my hand off before I get burnt. I have the choice and I respond. I respond wisely rather than reacting. And so just have a think of times in your life where perhaps you've become stressed or burnt out and you haven't noticed. You haven't noticed until it's too late, and perhaps you're sick, you're burnt out, you're freaking out, you're zoning out. Maybe you're starting to engage in some unhealthy behaviours like over drinking, overeating, as we discussed before, over angsting, over controlling, overworking. So this ability to remain present, to stick with the difficult, is an incredibly important part of mindfulness. And we'll discuss more about how you can do this. So mindfulness helps us be present and notice proactively. And so this allows us to respond by making choices that align with our values. It gives us the ability to choose. Now here's another wonderful opportunity for a mindful listening exercise. And so just as we did in session 1, if you can find a partner, a friend, family, anyone you're around, even if you've got a pet, if you can't find if you can't find a human being, and just to talk while the other person's silent, and then swap over, the other person talks while you sit in silence, and put your timer on. Perhaps 2 minutes is quite a good idea if you know the person well. Perhaps try for 3 minutes and just talk about what causes you stress and how do you deal with stress. It's another great opportunity just to listen to someone in silence so that you can check in to notice any tendencies of your mind, what thoughts pop up as you're listening, and the same again, just noticing yourself as you're speaking. So it's all about noticing. There's no particular listening technique. This isn't about you have to listen actively, leaning in. I'm not giving you any technique here. I'm just basically getting you to notice your own experience of speaking and listening, because every one of us is unique and completely different, and so only by observing yourself can you really get to know how you work. And this is true self-awareness. So this is a great exercise, and it's also wonderful just to know what we have on board already. What causes us stress? What are those things? How often do we take the time to look at that? And then how do you deal with those stresses? Once again, if you can't find someone to share with, feel free just to journal and set a timer again, maybe a couple of minutes on each of the questions, and then we'll see how you go. Most of us nowadays live with chronic levels of stress, and this can be particularly harmful to our health and to to our mental and physical well-being. And the reason for this is that the body's physiological response to stress is the same nowadays as it was in prehistoric times, where this was our stressor, a predator such as the saber-toothed cat. And you may have heard of the flight or fight response, where our body is mobilized by the release of adrenaline and cortisol so that we're able to fight a predator like this or escape it. And so, what actually happens in the body in response to stress? Our heart rate increases, um, our digestion shuts down, our immune system shuts down, our reproductive system shuts down, because all of these are non-essential things to have going on in our body when we're wanting to mobilize our flight or fight response. Another interesting thing that happens in the body is that our upper level thinking, our executive thinking, our higher cognitive ability is shut down, and we start responding just from this lizard brain, from our primitive part of the brain. And so that's why, for example, when you've got a deadline to meet and you're stressed, it's really, really hard to focus or concentrate on the work. Or perhaps if you're in an exam and you know the material really well, but for some reason you're under stress, your higher level thinking is shut down, so you can't actually you can't respond to the questions. You know the answers, you've practiced it a million times. And so this is basically just the human being's physiological response to stress. And so if this is the case, then what can we do about it? And so I'd like to just explore a little bit of a story here about cast your mind back to a time where you'd seen a wildlife documentary and you see a herd of gazelle running away from a predator, perhaps a big lion, and then the lion will chase after the weakest in the herd quite often, and then take it down and sink its teeth in and kill, and then begin to eat the gazelle. And then often you'll see a panning shot, and in the distance you'll see these gazelle are returning to their grazing. So they've switched on their flight or fight response. They've escaped the predator, and now they're returning to eating. So if you just liken that to the same scenario happening to a human being, so say for example a lion was to traipse into my mindfulness studio and decide to attack one of my students and then to start making a meal of the student, I think that my mind, I definitely know that I wouldn't be able to sit down and have a coffee and a piece of chocolate cake that afternoon. So, what's the difference between my mind and the mind of the gazelle? And the reason for my for me to be still under stress is because my flight or fight response will still be switched on. And what's keeping my flight or fight response on? It's my thinking, my ability to invent fiction in my head. And so as a human being, and we're all alike in this, we can start to ask ourselves, what if? And our mind fills in the gaps. What if that lion was to come and get me? What if he was to get the rest of the students in the class? What if he was to go and find my family? So what if I'm not safe when I'm lying in bed at night? And this sort of thinking keeps our flight or fight reaction switched on all day and night. And so the gazelle who don't have this ability are able to return to their grazing, whereas for myself, I'd be possibly be having post-traumatic stress counselling for years afterwards. So if we accept that it's our thinking that keeps our flight or fight response switched on, then how does mindfulness suggest we go about reducing our stress or switching the flight or fight response off. And so there's a couple of things here that mindfulness can do for us in terms of helping us to cope better with stress. One of the first things is that the flight or fight response comes from the amygdala area of the brain. And the amygdala becomes less reactive with mindfulness. And so that's one step. Just with your formal mindfulness practice, you can reduce the reactivity of your amygdala. So before you try to rationalize or get perspective and end up just with this loop thinking and the continuous what ifs that are keeping your flight or fight response on, how about giving RAIN a go? RAIN is a exercise or a practice that you can use, and it's just based around the word RAIN, an acronym of the word RAIN. So firstly, we just recognize what we're experiencing. So you might want to name it. I'm experiencing stress. I'm experiencing anger. Whatever it is, just recognizing and naming it and allowing it just to be as it is. So that's okay. It's okay to be stressed. I'm a human being, and not to beat yourself up about being stressed. Have you ever noticed that sometimes you feel stressed and thinking, oh my goodness, there I am again feeling stressed, this isn't good for me, and so the loop thinking just gets worse and worse. So actually just going, hey, I'm stressed, I'm a human being, that's okay, and just recognizing that it is just the body's natural response. And this is a crucial step to make sure you get this part right, and that is to start investigating with compassion. So investigate like a detective, not what's going on in your mind. Remember, we have to try and get away from that thinking. We're just wanting to start noticing the body sensations associated with the state of stress or anger or whatever it is that we're feeling. So maybe your chest is tight, maybe your heart rate's sped up, maybe you can feel that adrenaline pumping into your body. And just noticing that can actually help, because we're taking a break from our thinking, it helps reduce the triggering of the flight or fight response, which is exactly what we want to do. And then N is for non-identify. So just there's a bit of stress passing through me rather than I am stressed. So don't become the stress, actually just notice it passing through you. And so this can be used for small stresses, when someone annoys you, makes you angry, and for other things too, that are bigger things. So the things that you may be huge events in your life that have caused you a lot of stress, or say, for example, even something like when you're flying, if you're scared of flying in an aeroplane, just do this. You may have to repeat the RAIN technique again and again just to sort of reduce that flight or fight response. So just noticing and recognizing what's there, allowing it to be as it is, and just noticing the body sensations attached to this experience, and maybe just dropping the story. By actually turning to the body sensations, we're just creating a bit of space between the stimulus and the response. And I encourage you to give this a go. I have had numerous accounts, numerous anecdotal evidence of this working with profound effects in people's lives. And for those of you that have depression, anxiety, anger management problems, I know it sounds really counterintuitive and it sounds really, really scary to actually turn towards and investigate what's going on in your body. But let me just tell you a story about a woman who'd come to one of our classes. This was a long time ago, and she gave me a call and she said that class that I came to, that mindfulness class, she said it was completely life-changing. And I said to her, tell me about it. And she said, I have young children, and my life has been completely derailed by anxiety, these anxiety attacks I regularly have. And she was holding down a very high corporate position, and she'd been on anti-anxiety medication for many, many years. And she'd come into the class and she'd learnt this technique, and she thought, that's a load of rubbish. She told me at the time, she thought, that's a load of rubbish. I can't do it. It's okay for people with normal levels of feeling or emotion. But for me, I'm an anxious person. I can't turn towards, it'll be too big. But she was clever enough to give herself the benefit of the doubt. And one day, when she felt this anxiety coming on, she decided, actually, she was a little bit curious, and she thought, I can feel the anxiety. Okay, that's all right. I'm allowed to feel anxiety. And then she started noticing the body sensations. And she started noticing tension in her chest. Her neck was really tight. And she felt sort of an incredibly fast heart rate. And just sort of felt this real sinking feeling, she described to me. And then she laughed and she said, you know what? This anxiety, it wasn't that big a thing. This thing that had actually completely derailed her life, when she turned towards it and looked at it, it was like, hey, that's not that bad. But what was bad? The bad thing was the stories in her head. Oh my gosh, I've got that anxiety again. That means I'm going to have weeks off work. Oh my gosh, I'm a failure. How can I have it and everyone else doesn't? I still haven't got on top of it. You'd be familiar with the stories we tell ourselves. And so this loop thinking had kept that flight or fight response on. And just for a moment, just for a tiny little moment, she went and sort of went, hey, let's have a look. What is it? What's there? Oh, not that much. I'm certainly not making light of these situations of anxiety, depression, but I encourage you with the help of your healthcare practitioner to start, or your mental health worker to start turning towards and actually noticing, even if it's just in small doses. And this is where John Kabat-Zinn's work was so profound, in that people who were suffering incredibly chronic pain, that it was completely ruining their lives. And what he found is what was ruining their lives is that the stories that they were attaching to this chronic pain, when they isolated it and turned towards like a detective over their body, the body sensations that were associated with that pain, this completely changed their relationship with the pain. So I know it's a really brave thing to do, and in your own time, when you're ready, turn towards that and just notice it. Get really curious. It can be quite fun. How do you experience anger? How does sadness feel in your body? Give it a go. Check it out. I'd be really interested to hear. Let me know. So once we recognise that our thoughts are what can keep our flight or fight response on and continue to make us feel stressed, even after a stressful event, we start becoming more accepting about using different techniques to give ourselves a bit of distance from our thoughts. And this recognition that thoughts are just thoughts, sometimes they're real and sometimes they're not, I think can be very, very helpful. So let's have a look at a few of the techniques. So when we've got difficult thoughts rolling around in our head, we can use our breathing. It's always with us. And there's many different methods of using breathing to help get some space from our thoughts and help move us away from flight or fight into a calmer, more relaxed state. And so one particularly useful way of breathing is to actually breathe into your abdomen. So breathe all the way down into your belly. And so on the inhale, you should feel your belly expanding and then contracting on the exhale. So give it a go. Just a nice long breath all the way in and all the way out. And noticing that when you extend your out breath longer than your in breath, that can oftentimes make you relaxed as well. So just have a little bit of a play with your breathing. Try the abdominal breathing. And then also just try counting 1 on the in breath and then 1, 2 on the out breath. And that may help to calm you down. And as we just mentioned, using the rain technique or just focusing on sensations in the body help us become more present and to maybe let go of the stories that we're telling ourselves, the ruminating about the past or worrying about the future. And the idea of recognizing your thoughts is just thoughts or neural firings of the mind. They may be true, they may not be true. Labeling your thoughts also helps you create a little bit of distance. Say to yourself, perhaps there goes another worrying thought, scheduling thought, judging thought. So we become the witness of our thinking, rather than feeling that we're identified or tied up into our thinking. Interrupting our thoughts can also be useful, especially at times when you might get woken up in the middle of the night with all sorts of crazy thoughts going through your head and you just can't break free from them. Just try talking to yourself inside your head. May sound a little crazy. Even just saying, okay, can't go there now. How about 9 o'clock in the morning? How's that for a more convenient time for your thoughts to have a little meeting together in your head? So don't be scared just to interrupt your thoughts and say that's enough. But I find it much more useful just to use the rain technique to really just get out of my head and into my body just by simply noticing the sensations in my body. So give it a go. I'd love to hear which way you find the most useful. So in summary, mindfulness helps us extend the space between stimulus and response, which can have a huge, huge effect on our life. Here's a quote from Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor. And he says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our happiness. Now, this is a wonderful journaling exercise that can help reduce the stress in our lives, because as we start discovering and engaging in what brings us joy and fulfillment, we naturally reduce our chance of becoming stressed. What happens is the busier we get, I call it the spiral of exhaustion, all the things on the outside drop off, all the things that we enjoy and we previously used to give ourselves time for, we often give up in order to get through the constant tasks that are at hand. And so this mindful journaling exercise can help you to remind you of those things that actually bring you joy. And so I encourage you just to set your timer, perhaps for 5 minutes, and just invite and encourage your thoughts to flow. You might write about anything that comes to mind, even if it strays from the prompt. If you've nothing to write, just keep writing, I have nothing to write. There is no right or wrong, just keep writing until the time is up. By writing this way, it allows the true feelings and those true things that possibly we've forgotten to arise. Journaling has a huge number of benefits. So give this exercise a go. I'd be keen to hear how you get on. And that brings us to the end of session 2, where we've taken a good look at our mindfulness and our emotions, and in particular turned the spotlight onto stress. And so here's just a few things that you can do at home before week 3, where we start to look at mindfulness and how we relate to other people. So if you can make sure you do a minimum of one body scan exercise per day, you will see the links to those exercises below. And if you can just journal what you notice. And remember, when you're doing the body scan, there's no right or wrong. You're just observing your present moment experience without trying to change it, making it better, worse. You're just allowing it to be and trying to drop those stories that are attached to it. This will help you when you start doing the RAIN exercise in response to stresses in your life. And now gratitude. Gratitude is an incredible way to help our mind work against our natural negativity bias. As a human being, we have a bias for negativity. We think of 3 negative things for every 1 positive thing that we think of. And this is because in prehistoric times, we were designed to be vigilant, to notice what's going on. Because if there was a noise around us or something slightly different than it was the day before, this could be an indication of a predator. This could be an indication of danger. And so we are actually designed to be always constantly looking for things that could go wrong. And one way to actually adjust this negativity bias, so we start looking for good things and positive things and seeing more of those and less of the negative things, is by starting a gratitude journal or a gratitude practice. If you prefer just to actually be thinking of these things rather than writing them down, obviously best practice is to write them down. But I have a lot of people that I work with that are using a gratitude practice where they actually just think of what they're grateful for every morning in the shower. And I have one lady who actually writes what she's grateful for on the shower, the glass of the shower wall. And so I like to theme the things that I'm grateful for. I try and think of a relationship. It might be present or past, maybe something that has ended badly but I've learnt from. An opportunity that's come my way that day. Or just something simple like the sunlight against my skin. And write them down in your journal. Can be very helpful. Count the number of times you take a mindful pause each day. So starting to get a little bit more discipline around that. And anything else you can think of. What you'll notice as you start learning and practicing mindfulness is you'll start to notice things more. Notice things about yourself that previously you didn't. Perhaps the common themes that are running through your mind. And even if you don't pause, you'll start to notice that you're not pausing. And all of this is good. Don't be in a hurry. Just allow your experience of mindfulness to be exactly as it is. There's no right or wrong, remember.